What's happening, everybody? It's your man, Dame DNYDC, host of the Two Mics Up podcast. Back again for another special live this evening with my co-host, Elisa Middleton. Lisa, how you doing this evening, sis?
I'm good. I'm good, bro. Thanks for asking. Hey, everyone. Hey, listeners. How was your week so far panning out?
Man, it's hard. Going in the office this week. It's been trying. Had some things come up that just got carried away, and it's odd that no, I wouldn't say odd, but it's funny how sometimes things coincide with us doing our live events and things like that. And we were talking about it, earlier. Oh, good
Hmm.
evening, Carmelina. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for having us or joining us tonight. Coming all the way from Columbus, Ohio. Columbus in the building. Um, with maybe National Mental Health Awareness Month. I think you and I, we were talking before coming on, we may need that mental health check. And it affects so many millions of people on different levels. And especially in our community, I don't want to say we overlook it, I think, at times. I think it's misunderstood at times. And really tonight, I think this is a great opportunity for us to kind of dive in just a little bit to work
Hmm.
towards getting a better understanding of what's going on and what we can do to better understand mental health and what's involved you know
I am totally an advocate for mental health. I am definitely in tune to that. I think that it should be a part of our um, routine. We
hmm
take care of our skin, our hair, our teeth, our body. We cleanse and do all of that. But we also need to take care of our mental health as well. We go for
agreed.
daily, yearly checkups, and women, our mammogram, pap smears, things like that. You should definitely, check in as well.
Agreed. Well, before we open, I want to take a quick second to thank a couple of our sponsors who are helping sponsors tonight's live. And I want to just jump in real quick with Next Level Keys and Riddick Entertainment. Here at Two Mics Up, we believe in supporting small businesses in and around your local area. Next Level Keys is a full service credit card repair firm that renders optimum services to their customers in all facets and walks of life. It could be qualifying for a mortgage, getting that new car, or getting funds for your business. Contact Next Level Keys at support@nextlevelkeys.com. Check out my man Quan. He's doing really good things over there. Riddick Entertainment, which is a multifaceted event management firm based here in Northern Virginia. Riddick Entertainment's detailed creativity and precision event planning will give you a truly meaningful and memorable experience. Please contact Riddick Entertainment at info@riddickent.com. So tonight's guest, we're going to bring her in. I think she's amazing. I think she's going to bring a lot of value to tonight's conversation, and she's here in the DMV, and I'm proud to have her on. So we're going to take a second, and I'm going to allow Jasmine, to go ahead and introduce herself to our audience. And Jasmine, please take a moment to let everyone know, who you are, where you're from, and what it is that you do.
Sure, thank you, and thank you both for having me. I really appreciate the invitation. And like you both were saying before, mental health is something that we really do need to talk more about. And May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so no better time than now to talk about it. But my name is Jasmine McLaughlin, and I am the owner and founder of Empowered to Thrive Counseling and Wellness LLC. I'm located in Richmond, Virginia. And I've been in private practice for a little over 2 years, and I've been doing it for a little over a year and a half full time. So I took the leap into full time entrepreneurship back in November of 2019, and I haven't looked back since. It's been a very
Nice.
exciting journey. And I specialize in treating adults with anxiety, depression, and difficulty navigating through life transitions. Some grief and loss mixed in there as well. And as you can imagine, during COVID, numbers have really gone up in terms of the people that I've been seeing. So we've been seeing a lot of people presenting with stress and anxiety and depression just from the pandemic. So, in addition to being a practice owner, I also have an ebook out. It's called Write It Out, a 10-day guided journal for reflecting, releasing, and restoring that I released last year. So I'm definitely an advocate for journaling as a way to take care of mental health.
Wow. That's that's a mouthful. And first,
It
let me
is.
just congratulate you on taking that oh so ever leap of faith and going out on your own and starting your own. So let me first congratulate that, because I
Thank
know
you.
we are conditioned to work and not, entrepreneurship is not really in our realm. So I'm glad that you're breaking barriers in that area. So kudos to
Mhm.
you for that. And I know since the pandemic, we haven't been right. Like we just I
Mhm.
mean, if I can speak freely, with mental health and loss, because loss
Right.
came along with the pandemic, and I know that I lost a few people, and I was really affected by that. And I had already been seeing someone since the loss of my mom in 2016. So that started my ever first initial therapy session. But I felt so
Mhm.
good after that, I subsequently started going, and going and going, and I just kept that up. And I know that 2020 really catapulted me into, seeking
Mm.
more therapy, if
More,
that makes
more
sense.
therapy
Right.
than it. No, it does. It does. And I just wanted to go back, just to even what Melina mentioned here about, some of the areas that are, impacting our neighborhoods. And I think this is a great place to start, Jasmine, being here in the DMV and in Richmond, have we also seen this type of impact, or are you aware of this type of impact even locally, on this level, as to what Carmelina mentions here in her statement? Well, she
Well,
says
I
she's
would.
right. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Were you going to say something?
No, go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to speak to accessibility. I mean, I think that that's definitely an issue in our community. As Black people and as in the Black community, there's already an issue of accessibility to medical care. So I think when it comes to addressing mental health, there's a disparity there too.
That,
So
Do you think
um,
definitely.
that it got a little better with now being able to do like these therapy sessions on Zoom, so you don't have to physically go to a brick and mortar?
Absolutely. And I've been doing sessions exclusively via telehealth for the past, year and 3 months, however long we've been in this pandemic. So I definitely think that that's helped. And I think that a lot more people are talking about mental health issues because, like during the pandemic, because it's something that is very common. And that's one of the things I was going to address in terms of like misconceptions. One of the misconceptions people have is that mental health issues are uncommon, but I would say that during the pandemic they've become a lot more common, especially in terms of what I see with the anxiety, stress, depression, grief and loss, and just isolation.
Mm.
Because as human beings, we're not really meant to function in isolation. So being in a position where we're supposed to stay in our homes, I mean, that just makes matters worse for a lot of people.
You
Well, that's
that
true too. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I I never really, and I guess for me, and I hear people talk about it. So the isolation part really hasn't hit me or started to hit me until recently. I know a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have hit that curve or that wall a lot sooner. So how do you, or what are good ways maybe to help people understand how to deal with that isolation, even though the claims are we're coming to the, that light is at the end of the tunnel and
Right.
we're returning back to normalcy. I don't know how true that really is, but like, how do people help move forward just in that isolation part?
Well, with the isolation, like even though they say we're coming out of the pandemic and everything like that, but throughout the pandemic and with numbers of COVID-19 rising and everything, I would say to people, there have been a lot of like virtual support group options, or just Facebook groups that people can be a part of. So connecting with people virtually is always an option. And I mean, I know a lot of us are experiencing Zoom fatigue. I know I do, just from being online all day. But when that's the only option, I think it's better than nothing. And I think that, we have to look at ways to get support that may be, non-traditional or not what we're used to during these times.
And I did want to piggyback off of that, as far as the pandemic and the coronavirus itself. We're seeing a lot of people, long haulers, people who are now having lasting effects of the coronavirus, and that can also. I know illness period can be depressing and coming out of isolation, but you really can't enjoy coming out of isolation because you're having these lasting effects. How do we encourage those who are going through something like that to, keep on? Because the long haulers are now coming forward because we're only a year in and we're finding this out.
Right. Well, I think a big part of recovery from anything, like whether it's a mental health issue or a physical health issue, is just knowing that you're not alone and trying to find a community of people that are supportive in the midst of that. So like with the COVID-19 long haulers and the people that are dealing with the effects long term, they're not alone. Unfortunately, you know what I mean? There are other people who are experiencing that. So I think a huge part of recovering and growing is being a part of a healing community, whatever that might look like for a person.
Right. And that may change or depend on the individual, basically, I guess, where they're at. Okay. And that's fair enough. So then I would want to ask then, like, can you talk to us and, our audience? A lot of us, again, is stigma when we say the word counseling.
Right.
Talk to us about the benefits of counseling and mental health counseling.
Well, I mean, as a person who honestly has been on both sides of the couch or both sides of the screen, because I've been in therapy before, I think as a therapist, every therapist should have a therapist. I mean, that's just how I feel. I think that whenever you're in a certain field and you're taking on the weight of other people, it's important for you to have someone to share your burdens with too. So I would say one of the benefits of therapy or counseling is really just having a non-biased, non-judgmental, supportive professional to talk to. Because some of us may think that, okay, well, I can just talk to my friends or my mom or my siblings about what's going on, but they're not trained, or they may be, right? But that's not really their role in the relationship if they are. If you're, also a sibling or a spouse of someone who's a mental health professional. So I would say the benefit is being able to talk to someone who is trained to treat and assess for mental health concerns. And just awareness, gaining awareness and just learning more about like your behaviors and your thought patterns, because a lot of people come to me and they've never been to therapy before. And I bring up something that I noticed and they're like, oh, wow, I never even knew that was an issue for me. So some people, go through life and they've never even been aware that they've had an issue with their thoughts and how that affects, their feelings and behaviors. And so talking about it openly in therapy can be helpful for people.
That is
I would
true.
say.
Yeah. I definitely concur with that. Like I said, my first interaction with therapy was through loss. It was through grief. And the first counselor, not so much, wasn't a good fit, but I didn't give up. I went on, you know, and found a good fit for me at that time. And it was so helpful that I just started advocating for it, because sometimes in our community we just think that we're supposed to keep on keeping on, especially women, because we have this stigma that we're strong and we're a
Right.
strong Black woman and we're this and we're that. And um, you know, loss and grief is heavy, you know,
Yeah.
and if you're not prepared or know how to deal with it, or um, it can change you. It can change the way that you navigate through life. And that was one of the things that I learned, is actually knowing who I am and how I tick and what makes me, you know, this way. So it just helped me to see some flaws and help me also to get better. So I really do appreciate that part of it.
I do,
Yeah.
and I just want to, because Jasmine, you mentioned something too that I don't think a lot of us think, and I just wanted to kind of change the outlook. You know, you say, you know, yourself as a therapist, you should have a therapist for
Yeah.
yourself. And I know, and I'll be honest, like I know, I'm laughing,
Absolutely.
right? But you know, then it just don't, like, because you really got to have. It takes a special person. Now that I think about it, you're taking on someone else's weight or the
Right.
weights of others. And what is that like though for you, to then have to sit and go through that? I mean, being a therapist already, like I mean, I'm trying to get to like what is that?
That's a good one.
What does that feel like, and what does that really do for you to continue forging through and carrying the weight of others?
Well, first, I'll say that I do think that there's this misconception about therapists, you know, that we are superhuman almost. And of course, we're human beings like everybody else. And so that's why I think it's important for therapists to have a therapist. But to be on the other side of the screen, you know, with my own therapist, I think it's a relief. You know, I mean, like Elisa was saying before, just grief and loss is heavy. But, you know, being a person that listens to other people's issues for, you know, day in and day out for most of the week, it can be very heavy stuff, you know, people's childhood trauma, their relationship issues, all of that. And so that's a lot to carry on. And of course, my own self-care practice has to be top notch, really. And so part of my self-care practice is seeing a therapist myself, someone to talk to that's not a family member, a friend, anyone like that.
Well, I want to just go back because I think we have two pretty good comments,
Good.
and I want to go back to Carmelina. You know, and I think what she's saying is, how does childhood trauma, you know, cause mental breaks as an adult? And I hope I'm getting that right. 'Cause that's how I'm interpreting the question. And I think, you know, could you kind of explain, you know, to some of us, you know, how we do? Because I know I've been through therapy myself, as Lisa said, you know, and you don't realize how certain things in your life help shape you or impact you as an adult. And can you maybe touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you kind of spoke to it with what you just said, is that, you know, childhood trauma or any of our experiences that we go through in life do shape us. And so I do see a lot of people, whether it's witnessing domestic violence in their lives, or you know, experiencing sudden loss of a parent or sibling growing up. I mean, all of that does affect people. Childhood sexual abuse, and sometimes people do not have a safe space to talk about it in their families, or you know, they are in family systems where it's like, you know, don't talk to anybody else about this. Like, everything that goes on in this house stays in this house. And I think that that can sometimes keep people, you know, from seeking help. And so part of breaking the stigma is saying, like, it's okay to talk to someone, and it's okay to talk to a professional that's not in your family. In fact, it's a healthy thing to do, to talk to someone that's trained to treat whatever you're dealing with. But absolutely, I mean, childhood trauma, a lot of other factors can lead to mental health issues in adulthood, especially if they're not addressed early on.
And those issues sometimes they manifest in different ways that people think is normal. And it really is not normal. And then we
Right.
get to the place where, unfortunately, in our community, we normalize these things and be like, oh, you know how Dame is.
Right.
Oh, you
Right.
know how
Mhm.
this one is,
Right.
but
Right.
really it's just the manifestation of something that has gone awry a while ago,
Mhm.
and we just don't take mental health seriously enough.
Agreed.
Yeah,
And that's why
exactly.
I didn't want to go back, with these comments. I think the comments are great.
Hmm.
Satara, saying,
Hey,
that
Satara.
no one is that strong to go through grief and emotional issue. Everyone does have, we have a breaking point. We all
Right.
are vulnerable and not superhuman. And,
Mhm.
Tisha hits it on the head too, as far as Black women, been carrying the burdens, their burdens and the burdens of others. And it really does weigh
Mhm.
on you. And you have to be able
Yeah.
to unload those burdens, and therapy is the proper way. Again, Satara is correct. It is okay. And this one took me a while to realize, my life, it is okay not to be okay.
Right.
And really understanding that is really huge. And I just want to go through some of the comments, especially when the parent dismisses the events when told. Well,
Yes,
Mhm.
now that's a
Jasmine's,
huge one.
that's a huge
Yeah, that is a
one.
huge one.
That's a huge
Mhm.
one. And it
Yeah.
doesn't even, it can be, um, I mean, on the scale can go, it can range from, like you said, sexual abuse to,
Mhm.
verbal abuse, to
Mm-hmm.
Right.
anything that when you tell a parent that as a child, I'm not okay, I'm
Right.
depressed.
Mhm.
And in our community, we'll get depress those dishes.
Yeah.
You better
That's right. Right.
depress that.
Yeah.
You
Right.
better
Right.
depress that. What do you have to
Right.
be depressed about? You're not paying any bills, and that just comes from
Mm.
generational trauma. So we
Mm-hmm.
passing that trauma down and not really taking mental health seriously.
Agreed.
Exactly.
Agreed. And,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and these were some really great comments. I mean, I really love, even this one here, Regina. Good evening. How you doing, sis? Many of us are re-traumatized, and that's another aspect that we don't really look at. Every time, God forbid, I even hate to think about situations like this when you have to encounter certain family members. I
Mhm.
think that's another taboo in our community that we really don't talk about or gets addressed. That we carry, every day. And this makes me want to ask.
Wow. Wow, that was a
Mhm.
heavy one, Regina. I'm
Oh
sorry,
It
baby.
yeah.
was,
That
it
was a
was,
heavy
it really.
one. Hmm.
Hmm. I just want to ask, and from my understanding, there's different types of or various ways to approach treatment. Could
Mhm.
you kind of, I don't want to say it's their best approach, but can you share some of the different approaches? Because I would imagine that is really based on the information or the interaction you're getting from the individual who's coming to see you. And could you
Right.
share some of those approaches?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like you said, it is heavily dependent on, what the person is presenting with or whatever the issues are. And some people's, there can be a range of issues, and some people's issues are more severe than others, or some people function at a different level than other people. So it can look different for everyone. But I would say, in general, I mean, I use a very collaborative approach when it comes to treatment. And I heavily emphasize the importance of really the relationship between myself and the client, because if I haven't built trust or built rapport with whoever I'm working with, I really can't expect the person to open up to me about their childhood trauma or whatever issues they have going on, and to be able to
Mm,
trust me with care, with their care. So when I say collaborative, I mean I develop the treatment plan with the client. And of course, depending on what's going on, there are specific things that I might do, like interventions that I might use to address the issue, but I include them in that process because it's ultimately the client's treatment. And they are the most, their needs getting met. That's what's most important.
mm. Well, we've had a couple, comments here that, kind of touch me.
Me too.
And
Mm,
I just want to go back, and these two, Satar, saying that, he told my uncle
wow.
that his wife was abusing me and dismissed it. Like, oh, you're being too
Mm,
much. And I think this goes back to even in our community. I think sometimes when I look back, you feel like you were being abused, but we call it discipline. Do we still
mm,
find a lot of that happening? today, or have you encountered any of that still happening today, Jasmine?
Well, I definitely see where, people grow up in families where they may have had certain experiences and then they shared it with their family members, and then the family members dismissed it or said, oh no, they weren't touching you that way. They were just hugging you, or, that's just how we show love in the family, or something like that, something that we would think is like, wow, that's ridiculous that they would even say that. And that's just traumatizing the individual even more. So I do see that, unfortunately. And so part of the process in therapy is really just like unlearning that that's okay, and reshaping the way we think about healthy relationships and what they're supposed to look like, because that's not healthy.
That's not healthy.
No,
I was saying not
no,
healthy at
and
all.
and setting boundaries for
Mm-hmm.
people who, like she said, abusive, and then the guise of discipline,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and then people who are verbally, abusive or
Right.
mentally abusive. It doesn't have to be a spouse. I know that I found that some of my mom's friends were very abusive,
Mm-hmm.
because it was every time you saw them, like Regina said, it was re-trauma, because
Mm-hmm.
it was
Mm-hmm.
all about, at that time, it was all about my weight, what I was eating, why are you eating this? And this could be a room full of people, and it was just like, I just do not like when Miss Jerry comes around. Like, I
Right.
just did
Right.
not
Mm-hmm.
like this lady, and she was one of my mom's good friends. My cousins experienced this with her. She was always so negative and nasty, and every time I saw her, but I never realized it was traumatic to me until I
Mm-hmm.
got to therapy.
Right. But
Mm-hmm.
You
that just makes me want to kind of touch in though on Kamalina's earlier comment, Lisa, because it just sounds like this here, what she's saying is true. Like, even in all of that, if I'm correct, it was like you were made to kiss up and make up with her, every time you
Mm-hmm.
seen it. And unfortunately, it made Kamalina have, she decided to get up and move away. Um, but like, as a young person and becoming an adult, Jasmine, like, how do you, like Lisa eloquently said, like, how do you set those boundaries yourself so that this doesn't happen, or this pattern, we break that chain so Lisa doesn't do it with her kids and it becomes a normal pattern. Like, how do we break that, the cycle,
Mm-hmm.
that cycle of thinking?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is just like there's teaching that goes on in therapy about, like this is what a healthy relationship looks like. And this is what it means to set a boundary, because I've found a lot of people don't really know what a boundary is or how to set one, unfortunately, because that's not what's modeled to them when they're growing up. And if you're, a child sexual abuse survivor, and someone's take advantage of you, your body, you may not know that it's okay to set that limit and say, no, that's not okay for you to touch me that way. So part of it is, just learning what it's like to have a healthy relationship with your body, with other people, and how to set the limit there.
Wow, man, this is
Yeah.
this is this is. I mean, I'm happy that we're talking about it because there's really a lot to really unpack, and I
Yeah.
thank everyone for sharing, their comments and their stories. Not to, and like she said, I was just going to say not to bring up things that may still
Mm,
hurt.
mm,
But I think it was important for us to really have this conversation because this, in a way, this platform was designed to be therapeutic and to be able to openly have these conversations with someone like Jasmine. And I thank you all for
mhm,
sharing and pouring out your hearts and
mhm.
your experiences with us, and those watching. Maybe they can learn something or walk away uh, with some tools. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Thank you.
Because because this is something that I think that everyone walks around with some form, whether it's low
Hmm.
level or moderate or high. If you work every day, you live through this pandemic, you love
Hmm.
people,
Mm-hmm.
you're a part of a family, you have some level of anxiety, you have experienced some level of loss, you have experienced some type of trauma, just from living. And we have
Right.
to learn that it is okay to do a tune up, if you will. Keep yourself aligned, in
Mm-hmm.
check, your mind, body, and soul in one area, because it is so hard, like Jasmine said, to unlearn those things. I never knew how hard that was, because things are habits. Even our thinking is a
Mm-hmm.
habit, right?
Habit.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So to unlearn that, you sometimes to tell set boundaries is very hard, because you don't want people to think that you don't love them, but I love me more. So I
Right.
can't,
Mm-hmm. Well, before we continue, I just want to say, Tara, thank you so much. You're getting me emotionally charged. Just with your comments, because it's a lot.
And she's a sweetheart.
I feel it. So thank you. Before we
Mhm.
transition, into this next segment, I just want to take a moment to just thank a couple of our other sponsors, TD3 Insurance Agency and Regina Leggett over at Legal Shield. She's an independent associate here in the DMV. Check her out. TD3 Insurance Agency protects and covers all your insurance needs, from auto, home, renters, motorcycles, commercial, specialty, and life insurance. TD3 is licensed in the DMV, North Carolina, and New York. They have a brand new office here at 3985 Prince William Parkway, Suite 206 in Woodbridge, Virginia. So check my man Cliff out. Regina Leggett, she's a legal Shield independent associate. If you're worrying about a legal problem, if you need legal advice or legal representation, the days of you not being able to afford an attorney are long gone. Go ahead and reach out to Regina Leggett, at Regina Leggett wearelegalshield.com. She's doing great things here in our community, and I'm pretty sure she can direct you if you need help in other areas as well. So to get back
Mhm.
to the conversation, I know Lisa, you had some questions coming
I
out the break. Yeah,
do.
I'm
I
with
had
you.
to
You
take
want to
a woosah.
right? Look, I'm
Like,
with
I
you.
was not expecting all of this,
I'm
but
with
I'm
you.
good. I'm good. I just needed a whew. So let me ask you, Jasmine, how do gender stereotypes affect mental health?
Well, I would say that anytime you think about a stereotype, it's something that really keeps someone in a box, and it keeps us from really showing up as our most authentic selves. So, like, one stereotype that I know is prevalent is that men aren't supposed to show emotion, or boys don't cry, or those kinds of things that we hear so much, and they can be very harmful, because what I've seen is that the men who seek therapy really have a hard time opening up sometimes about how they're feeling, or they have a hard time seeking therapy in general, because seeking help is seen as a sign of weakness, that we hear about in some of our families. So I would say, yeah, like a stereotype like that, to keep people from expressing how they feel, which is a very healthy thing to do. But other stereotypes, just anything. I mean, women and their roles in the home, and feeling like they can't break out of that, bondage of doing all the chores when they work a full-time job, and having say they have a husband that kind of subscribes to that mentality, and they're just breaking their back trying to do it all the time, and that leading to like this superwoman, or superwoman syndrome. And I see that a lot in the women that I work with, trying to do it all, feeling like you can't say no, because you
Mm,
have to carry the weight of the
mm,
world on your shoulders all the
mm,
time. And
Right.
so part of the work is really like unlearning that, and knowing, and just learning that it's healthy and okay and necessary to ask for help in order to carry those, to share the weight with other people instead of having to carry it all yourself. So those are a few
wow.
examples, I would say.
Those
Yeah.
are big ones, though.
Mm-hmm.
Especially
Those are huge.
those are huge,
Yeah.
especially the male perspective. Because I always wondered, like, why wouldn't a man cry? Isn't he human? Like,
Well,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a
well,
human emotion.
well.
Right.
Let me touch on, because it resonate with me what she said specifically in that. So I've been raised by a single parent by my mother. Boy, you don't cry. You ain't bleeding. It don't hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It ain't broke. Don't hurt. Not raising no girls. I'm raising a man. And
Mm-hmm.
just in that though, you have already been programmed at a young age that emotion really doesn't exist, right?
Right.
In a sense. So when you don't know how to speak it, or you've been, I don't want to say muted, but
Mm-hmm.
you've been muted and not speaking that. So as you grow, it becomes very difficult for a man to, like you said, at least, yeah, it hurts, but I'm not going to
Right.
express it how you do because I wasn't shown that. We show
Mm-hmm.
our daughters, we pick our daughters up, we hold them, we hug them, we kiss the boo boo, we make it all better.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, it ain't broke. Get your ass. That type
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
mentality when and
Mm-hmm.
that's, I think, I understand and I resonate with what she was saying because that was part of my upbringing. But that was the
Yeah.
only tool though that my mother had or knew because there was no other male figure,
Mm-hmm.
that really was there. So I can't blame
Mm-hmm.
her. But now,
I think
again,
it's
though, I was
generational though.
it,
Mm-hmm.
and you know what? It
Mm-hmm.
could very well be. It
Mm-hmm.
may very well be because I don't have the pleasure of having a son either. Because I
Mm-hmm.
probably I think I would have been different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I'm that way with my nephews. Like, hey, it's okay. If it hurts, you can cry.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be comfortable in your skin as a man too, to accept that tool or understand that it's okay. It took me a long time to really understand that that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Wow.
I would add to that. I think like in the Black community, like with the whole like superwoman, the Black superwoman syndrome, or Black superwoman, this idea. I think in a way, like Black women have become masculinized, if that makes sense. And like we're not supposed to show emotion because we're supposed to be strong and carry the weight of everyone else. So if we show emotion or we say how
Oof.
things are affecting us, then we have nowhere to share that burden or share that weight because we're expected to carry it all. So yeah, I do think that it's sometimes women grow up with that too. Girls grow up being taught like you can't depend on other people. You can't trust anybody. Be independent. So I see a lot of that, in people that I work with.
Wow.
And that is so true because that is the way that I was raised. Like only have yourself to depend on.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have
Yeah.
anybody else to depend on. You don't have the luxury of X, Y, and Z because you're a Black woman. You cannot be angry when you're angry. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot
Mm-hmm.
cry. You can't do that. My mom, God bless her, I love her to death, and I know she did the best she could. But her favorite saying was, "You just have to keep on keeping on." And that was a
Yeah.
coping
Mm-hmm.
mechanism for them. And I say generational because she was
Racial. Yeah.
born in 1930. So they didn't
Right.
Yeah.
have no outlet. They just had to keep going. And those are the
Right.
things that we have to unlearn and not feel so
Mm-hmm.
guilty as women when we
Mm-hmm.
are feeling overwhelmed, when we're just tired. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we're lazy, we're just tired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well,
we're human. We get
yeah.
tired. We can break down too. And I think that's the thing. Like we're seen as superhuman. And that's where it's problematic because we're not superhuman. We're human beings like everyone else.
Yes,
Well, I'm,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm, and I know I'm probably shouldn't, but I know I'm pretty good for one of these in episode, or live. I got to go off the rails just a little bit.
Jasmine, buckle up. That's all I'm going to say. When his hands start doing this, that means we get ready to go.
Just out of
Okay.
curiosity, just out of, this is just a curious question. And so
Mm-hmm.
we talk about stereotypes in gender. I
Mm-hmm.
want stereotypes in race or races. Do you
Mm-hmm.
find across the board that most of us are feeling the same type of pressures or dealing with the same type of stresses, or is it maybe more cultural or racial um,
Differences.
differences that you come across?
Well, I think there absolutely are differences. I mean, just even if you look at the pandemic, about the disparities in different communities, people's access to vaccine distribution, even. I mean, so there are some disparities there. And I think it also depends on class. Like what class you come from, your economic class. So a lot of these like identities they're intersectional, so you can talk about race, but you also have to look at what kind of neighborhood the person lives in, and then their gender, because Black women, we, depending on our class and educational background and all that, like we navigate the world through a different lens. So I think so many things are just intersectional, so we really can't look at it in a vacuum even.
Okay.
So did you find during the pandemic and the height of George Floyd and all of these racial bias, police brutality incidents that were going on all during the pandemic, did you find that there was a spike in feeling like just a little overwhelmed with everything being African American navigating through?
Oh, definitely. I would say like June of last year. That was like 6 months after I went full time in my practice. After I took the leap, and so I would say things kind of skyrocketed. I was getting so many calls about people, having just a lot of stress, and it was race related stress. Or hearing helicopters and above their house and that triggering them, and hearing sirens and that would trigger them, and so it would not even be about the class, like economic class, because these were Black women with very good jobs, but it's like, I have a Black child, like I'm scared for my own life. So I think a lot of these things, like, it really doesn't matter what class you belong to, if you're a Black person in America, like these are our lives that are very much on the line, and that's scary and traumatic.
Yeah. I think we do, as Black people, live with a certain level of trauma.
Yeah,
Have to go
we
back to
do.
that. We had, I want to touch on a couple of comments. I saw, old school upbringing really is a double-edged sword, says Regina. There's part of me that's grateful for the old school
Me
upbringing.
too.
And I only bring that up because, and we touched on it earlier, I know I can identify with part of my old school upbringing that may have been a problem. But do you think, though, there needs to be a little bit more of that intertwined in today's youth and upbringing? Because some of them just a little wild up the chain, and it seems like there is no foundation at all. Because like I said, I think mine was, when I look back, was a little jacked up, but today there's none at all in some instances.
I mean, I think it depends on what aspect, I guess, of the old school upbringing we're talking about, because I think, because I guess that can be interpreted in many different ways, in terms of what we consider old school upbringing.
Well, let me speak for like whipping that ass. Like,
well, that's generational. There's generational trauma, right? Just from old school upbringing that was toxic, that was taught and passed down. I think the younger generation is in tune, I think, personally, with what they're going to talk. Yeah, I do. I feel like they have their pronouns. They're not going to be put in a box. They do not conform to normal gender conformity. They're moving to a different drum, and they are speaking on those old school things that was traumatic. I think that's just me, but I'm no professional.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that with just millennials and also Generation Z, there is a lot more talk about like mental health issues, and I think TikTok has definitely played a role in that. You see so many therapists on TikTok, and I think that the fact that mental health is being talked about more is very important. So, I mean, how we see certain things is just different. And that can be, I think that can be a very good thing if it opens people up to talking about, these sorts of issues.
Well, Gina, that's I guess I kind of with Gina on, because sometimes, I'm not saying all, I'm not going to lump some all, But sometimes it just, I will agree with you. Sometimes it just feels there is, and part of it, the previous though, I put on us because we have a bad way of communicating to them. So I will say 50-50. The future, I might agree because I think we have a great future, but then there's things that I see and I'm like, oh, what the hell? Like we're in trouble. So yeah. Hey, Terrain, you're right, and it could be the internet. We live in a different world.
The
We had
internet,
TV,
yeah.
they got the internet.
Right.
So it's a
Mhm.
whole new thing. So if I could just ask, we're talking about just different things, and one of the things we talked on earlier was stigma. Um,
Mhm.
we all, to varying degrees, I believe, and this is just my opinion, have very varying stigmas about mental health. And
Mhm.
really, part of this conversation I wanted to have is what could you, as a professional, really just on a very basic level for everyone, to be able to check on their own mental health and how they should move forward. Is there a checklist or things that they should do or we should do and then move forward, with continuing with our own mental health?
Well, I think a very basic thing that everyone can do is like you said, check in with yourself. So asking yourself, spending some time in self reflection. I think that's a huge part. Like if you choose to go to therapy, that's a lot of it too. It's just questions about how are you feeling. I think a lot of people, especially these days with so much going on, like don't take a time to slow down long enough to really say, like, how am I really feeling? Like, how are all these things that are happening really affecting me? And that's an important part of taking care of our mental health, is really being in tune with how we're feeling on a day-to-day basis. Like, if we're all going through this pandemic, so whether it's anxiety, stress, grief, all those sorts of issues. Yeah, she mentioned meditation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge one. Exercising, taking care of our physical health will improve our mental health. So those things are connected.
Wow.
Finding support, there's so many things we can do to take care of our
Yeah.
mental health.
Is
Yeah.
listening to yourself and listening to, because I know that I'm a pusher, right? I push and push myself, push myself. Well, I think I'm getting better. Let me just say, but
I'm not gonna say
like,
nothing. I'm not
like we
saying it.
push and push ourselves to the limit, and we're not um like listening. If you're done, or you need to say no because you can't go any further, or you need to check out for just a day or two to regather. Um, we shouldn't push past ourselves, if that makes sense. If you know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to say, Jasmine, like just don't wait to the breaking point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that's where the slowing down piece comes in, and so many of us are not taught that. And like you said, you heard throughout your life, like just keep on keeping on. That means just keep going and don't really slow down to pay attention to what you're really feeling or what's really going on with you. And so, I mean, I think that's like you said, generational. And I think a lot of these messages are passed down and they came from somewhere. Our
Mhm.
ancestors who were worked to the bone, so they never got a chance to really slow down and say, this is how I'm feeling. So or I want to take a mental health day. I mean, that wasn't heard of, when they were working in the
No,
fields.
No, no.
no.
So
Uh,
yeah, so I think a lot of people, like, just, if they've heard that throughout their lives, they just live life on autopilot, and really don't take the time to slow down. And so that really can be like a trauma response,
mhm.
like not
Wow.
knowing how to slow down long enough to really say, like, I feel really sad right now and this is why, or like I'm really having a hard time dealing with this grief. So
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
yeah.
Good point, Carmelina. That's so true.
Wow, till
Right,
you
that's
fall
true. Till you
down.
fall down.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And that's true. So I
That
just
is
wanted to go
true.
Mm-hmm.
back real quick because I think Regina had brought up a really good point. Um, in what you were saying, sometimes we need to look at both sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
But would you agree with this? Because in a way, I think I understand what she's saying, and I have a slight agreement in this point that there is a difference in having a mental health issue and maybe for some of us, not all, having a lack of resiliency. to bounce back from a situation. Now, would you agree to that statement, or do you have a difference of opinion in that statement?
I mean, I think I would agree with that. I do think that mental health issues like depression and anxiety, trauma, if people have not learned coping skills to deal with them and it's going untreated, I mean, that can impact their level of resiliency. So I think practicing or taking care of your mental health can build resiliency.
Right.
Yeah. And addressing
Absolutely.
the issues. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. I
Great.
totally agree. I agree with that because you can't, like, that's just like pushing. You can't,
Mm-hmm.
if you
Mhm.
don't know that, you may be a functional depressive, person.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Right.
Mm.
you
Mm.
work your 8 hours a day, but you can't do anything
Anything.
other than that. Doesn't mean that you're not resilient, but you're not recognizing
Good
that
point.
you have depression.
Yeah,
Very good point.
Because
exactly.
we always go around misdiagnosed. I do believe that in the Black community that
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
we have some bad traits
Misdiagnose or self-diagnose,
or
or
self-diagnosed, or your
what's that?
cousin,
Right, your cousin,
yeah,
WebMD, or whoever they get. All
Yeah.
yeah. Because there's a difference than a confidant, right? Someone that you talk to on
Mm-hmm.
the phone and tell your feelings to a professional like
right.
Jasmine, who
Mm-hmm.
can say, listen, this is what's going on, rather than your cousin who you tell everything to, and she's like, oh, okay, girl, you're gonna be all right tomorrow. Just get some rest. There's a
Hmm.
big
Mm-hmm.
difference.
Right. So we got a couple
Yeah.
here that I do want to go back to, because I think I'm going to go back here to Lisa.
Mhm.
Great question here. I think she asked, is it safe to develop your own coping skills when dealing with trauma? Is that a good or a bad thing, or is it on the individual? I think that's a great question.
I mean, if you've learned your own coping skills throughout life, I mean, it
Mhm.
just depends on what those coping skills are, right? Because we can have healthy and unhealthy coping skills. So I think it just depends. But
Yeah.
I think you know, it never hurts to if you're struggling, it never hurts to talk to someone, talk to a
Mm.
professional.
To
Okay.
Yeah.
see if those coping skills are in line with coping, or
Yeah, and
are you
helping you
just
heal.
and helping you
Mm.
heal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So there's some other questions, and I will get to them. I'm sorry, but some of these are just great. I just have to stop and pause while we have Jasmine on, and I just want to be able to answer your questions. I think this is another great one. So, what happens? And I don't know if have you ever experienced this, Jasmine, but what happens when you believe you need help, you seek and you're told you're fine after talking to a therapist?
Um, I guess I would wonder, is that like after the first time you talk with the therapist, like the intake appointment, or after several meetings? I mean,
Mm.
because part of the therapy process is like if it's an issue that can be resolved, in several sessions, and once we've met our goals for treatment, it's okay to discharge them, right? Like you would get discharged
Mm.
from the hospital after an injury heals or something like that. So I think it all depends on the context with that one.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's fair enough. Man, these are really great. I'm gonna go back to Lou real quick. He says, personally, I think the word mental health has been diluted. And anyone that's just going through hard times in life and don't know how to deal, will or can be classified themselves as mentally unhealthy. Do we? 'Cause in a way, I agree. Again, though, this goes back to I think what you were saying, or your class, like maybe where you are financially, depending on what type of resources you have access to, that can, in a way, maybe in my opinion, skew how some of us are viewed, when we go see that therapist. Because, like Lisa said earlier, I went through three at one point. Like, no, you're not doing it. No, you and I, the second one, you're not doing it. And sometimes, though, but I was able to find that one. But sometimes many of us are not able to go through multiple. And then we get classified as being mentally unhealthy. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Um, well, I think that, sometimes there's situational stress, and that doesn't mean that someone has a mental illness.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, like if you're talking about like financial issues, that's like a stressor that you're having, that and that prevents you from seeking help. if that's a barrier to you seeking help. So sometimes that is a barrier. But that doesn't mean that you're dealing with it in an unhealthy way. The access isn't there. Does that make sense?
Yes,
it does.
that does.
Okay.
Because, there is a such thing as a situational situation, right? Because it's not that you may have a mental issue, you may be going through something at the time. So, like death or eviction or financial ruin or something like that, if goes unchecked, can become a mental health issue. But while it's going on, it is a situational issue, a situational stressor, like she said, a stressor, because you're stressed out. Because I never thought that I had any mental health issues per se, but when I went to counseling for the very first time because I went for grief, I started learning things about myself. And then I started learning other things. And it wasn't that I had a mental health issue. I think that I had ways of coping that were learned that were unhealthy. And then I have to look and see why you do this. Why do you do that? Why does this happen? And so it becomes a treatment where you just kind of check yourself, so you don't fall back. So I think that I think mental health issues, meaning like, schizophrenia, or am I saying that right? Like, is that a mental health issue? Like,
It's a mental illness. Yeah, it's a diagnosis.
Right, a mental issue.
So yeah, I think what you're speaking to is that sometimes you go through things, or there's like prolonged stress or something that happens, and it can, if you already have like a pre-existing mental health condition, of course, those situational, those life stressors can make it worse. But sometimes, you can go through something and it can cause a mental health issue, like prolonged grief, and then it can look like depression over time. So yeah.
Okay.
I think Law said something about being a black man.
Black man in America. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Because that's a whole mental health issue.
That's a whole
right
nother.
there.
That's a whole nother issue, right? That's a whole other. And I mean,
that's a whole mental health issue right there.
I just wanted to kind of go back to a couple of those because I think there was two. Like Lou was a great one, but that really broke that I had to really like this. Like, is mental health a diagnosis from a doctor? Like, and I never really like therapists, like someone like yourself, Jasmine. You do go through education and trainings and different things for this, but are you considered a doctor, or is that, what I'm saying? Like, that's a great point. I never really thought about that myself.
So no, I'm not a doctor. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I'm a licensed mental health professional, and it doesn't have to come from a doctor, meaning an MD. But I still can diagnose people. So that's a part of what I can do under my license, is diagnose people. And a diagnosis comes from a book called the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, version 5. And so, yeah, I mean, not everyone who seeks counseling needs a diagnosis or meets criteria for a diagnosis from that book. But the thing about it is that if you use insurance, they're going to look for medical necessity. So you have to have a diagnosis in order to use insurance to cover therapy.
And you get a choice when you do the insurance, whether you want a therapist like Jasmine who can talk you through what you're going through, make you recognize how you may be in a situational thing, how you contributed, how your traumas contributed, to a psychiatrist who is going to push and prescribe medication. And I don't want to say that like a psychiatrist is bad. Let me back that up a little bit. I don't want to say like psychiatry is bad, but there is a difference in treatment when you see either or. Is that a fair assessment?
Or you can see both. I mean, sometimes people come in and they may, I may think that from my assessment, they would benefit from medication, but I can't prescribe medication. So I would, refer them to another professional to prescribe that. But therapy and medication, depending on the person's issues, can work, in tandem. So it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for clearing that up, because I always thought it was either or.
Yeah, it doesn't
Not
have to
that
be.
they work conjunction too.
Right. Right. And again, Shireen brings up a good point. There's also you can have a holistic health journey, which again is a whole nother, I guess, avenue or topic or to this, which I think is a great option for many. And and that's where I was going. So that people don't do exactly that, self-medicate. Yeah, right. Yeah. So, why can't a therapist prescribe medication?
It's depending on the therapist's credentials, like that's just not a part of my license. As an LCSW, I can't prescribe medication. Like you have to be a nurse practitioner or an MD, someone with a medical background, which I don't have. So.
Okay. Well, that's been a lot.
It was good though.
This was good. Yes.
No, this was great, and I really appreciate Jasmine taking time out. And before we close out or do anything, if there's any other comments or any other questions that we overlooked or didn't address or something that you want to share, please do, so we can while we have Jasmine with us, get it out. And okay, Satara, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate
Yeah.
you taking the time. So before we go, Jasmine, can you please? Oh, you have a question?
Yes, yes. I'm sorry. I know we
It's
gotta go, but I just want to know: is there separate grief counselors, or is grief counseling a part of regular therapy, like what you do?
Well, I would say that, as therapists, many of us have a specialty. So there may be some therapists who have grief as their specialty, or some therapists have trauma as their specialty. So like I said, anxiety, depression, helping people navigate through life transitions. That's my specialty, I would say. But a life transition can also mean the loss of somebody that was really important to you. So it can look different, but I would say that, therapists have specialties. So there are some who specialize in grief and loss. And some of that can come from their own life experience, and that makes them more passionate about working with people who've experienced grief and loss.
But it doesn't have to necessarily be a grief counselor. You can just go to a therapist if you're having those grieving issues.
Yeah, you can, but I will say, like, sometimes therapists have a niche, and so a particular group of people that they like working with. So there may be a therapist that doesn't specialize or doesn't really work with people who've experienced grief, and they may refer you to someone who that's their specialty, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we do, Cliff brought up what I thought was a great question. If you're taking the meds, right, does that, just slow down the body? And how does that, I guess, medically help improve your mental, by taking the medication?
I would say it depends on the medication and what it's treating. Because I've seen, where there are a lot of medications out there, depending on what they're addressing with it, like whatever the person's diagnosis is, and it can cause harmful side effects. But in most cases, or in some cases, the benefits outweigh the risks. But I guess it would just depend on the medications that we're referring to.
Okay.
And the person's individual response, because that can look different too.
Well, and they do like a little cocktail. They go through a couple of them, right, to find out what really works with you as the individual, like a combination of things, depending on what they're diagnosed with, because that's kind of a general assessment.
Yeah, and depending on how the person responds to whatever is being prescribed. Because, just because it's a medication designed to treat depression or anxiety does not mean everybody will have the same effect or the same benefit from the medication. So.
Yeah, I think that's a big stigma
Big
too.
stigma too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a big stigma too, is the medication, because I don't know, we have this old way of looking at like, we don't want to be zombies, and we don't
Eh,
want to be,
Yep.
looking, but I
Hmm.
Yeah.
think that they have advanced in that area. I
Yeah, so
think.
true. So true. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's body chemistry is different. So we're not all created the same. And it's
Hmm.
true. You
Hmm.
have
Mhm.
different effects for everybody.
Yeah, and
Um,
there's even like genetic testing out there that some psychiatrists are able to do to test how people might metabolize certain medications. So yeah, that's outside of my scope, but of course it's out there. We've made so
right.
many advances that
Right.
people can. It's easier to find the right medication these days if that was a thing.
Right, right,
Hmm.
Yeah.
right. Hmm.
Well, you have to be next to death of mediation in Columbus, or medication. I'm going to imagine in
You
Columbus,
have to.
Ohio. You have to be next to death for medication in Columbus, Ohio, even if you have a healthy background of use. That's
Hmm.
crazy.
Well, Ohio is a pretty different state. That
It's tough.
state is.
It's tough. Tough out in Ohio.
So, yeah, Ohio is very different.
Mm,
You can't
didn't know that.
take a
So,
certain psych
psych med.
medicates too. Oh
Mm,
yeah.
mm,
But
okay.
did they change that? Is that still a thing?
But for certain
Hmm.
jobs,
Yeah, because I thought the Disabilities Act or something kind of curtailed that. Or
I thought,
is that
right.
still a thing
Well, we can
that you
only
could
talk.
be discriminated against? I don't
Yeah, I
know.
don't know.
I
I,
don't
I
know.
didn't think that was something people could be discriminated against for, but maybe so.
I don't
Um,
Okay.
know. We had to get Shireen, and we had to get a little more info on that one, Shireen. You had to share that with us,
And
sis.
maybe that's
Definitely.
why a lot of people hide whether they take psych drugs or
Right.
psych meds and things like that, because
Mhm.
then they're frowned upon or looked upon differently as well. If
Right.
someone think, because that's always like a joke in the community. Oh, you did you take your meds today? That kind of
Hmm.
thing. So it's a stigma.
mhm, it
Wow.
is.
It's a
Yeah.
lot. So, Jasmine, before we, um, close out, uh, yeah, we're gonna talk to Ryan about that one, Satara. We're gonna get more info. Um,
Oh wow.
we all want to be educated, and that's what I love about this. We'll get more information and we'll come back. But before we go, Jasmine, um, can you please share your information with our audience and those who may be looking for um, some help or someone to talk to? Really, I think is a first step and towards getting our mental health exercises and getting ourselves better prepared to deal with some of our challenges, especially with COVID. So where can we find you and your offices and your practice?
So I'm doing telehealth exclusively right now, but my website is www.empowered2thriverva.com. And I will say that sometimes I close my I have a wait list, and I'm at capacity. So I would also recommend directories like Therapy for Black Girls, Therapy for Black Men, Psychology Today. Those are all really good options if you need to find a therapist in your area. And I'm licensed in Virginia. And you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Empowered to Thrive RVA. I'm also on Facebook on my business page, which is just my business name, Empowered to Thrive Counseling and Wellness LLC. So that's how you can find me online.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Wow.
You have been a wealth of knowledge this evening. I'm walking out better than I came in.
Oh
Listen,
wow, that's good. That's
I'm about to
good.
be on the wait list. I want to see. I gotta get up.
Hmm. I agree. I definitely want to go back. And I do want to show this one more time. Satara, you said it so well. And I want to
Mm-hmm.
thank you, Jasmine, and Elisa, and everyone here tonight. Thank you all, because I think this was really important. We all needed this. I do enjoy the open
Yeah,
discussion about mental health, amongst other things. And Satara is right. This is not really about race, religion, or class. We should be open and honest to allow others to feel safe when it comes to how they feel they need to express themselves.
that's right.
And that
Mm-hmm.
very well said. And I couldn't have said it better myself. So, Lise, before we go, sis, you got anything? Okay, you got
Listen,
anything?
I need to lay down. Okay.
This was a lot. Yeah.
This was like this was a lot, but I really do. I enjoyed the show. I enjoyed the interaction with the audience, and definitely
Hmm.
thank you so much, Jasmine, for educating our audience and making it a safe place to open up and feel good, and for people to take a second look at getting
Mhm.
mental health, getting therapy.
Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you
Well,
so much.
we really loved having you on. It's been thank you, Tisha. We really hope and we really put a lot of work and effort into trying to bring things that can educate and empower and impact our community. And I think this was one that was right on time. Uh, couldn't have done
Hmm.
it any better. And I thank Jasmine for really just working with us to make this a reality this evening. Before we
Absolutely.
go, thank you. Yes, absolutely. Before we go, I want to also just thank uh, our remaining sponsors, DJ Coco Brown and Bubbles and Brews Philly. If you are in need of a DJ Coco Brown is the person to call. DJ Coco Brown, or AKA, or her real name is Chanel Brown. She's an experienced DJ that provides both mobile and virtual musical services. She's based out of the Delaware, Philadelphia area, but she's traveled. She's been here to the DMV, y'all. So give her a call. You can contact her at chanel.brown@gmail.com. And for those of you that have family that lives in the Delaware, Philly, Southern New Jersey area, have your family check out Bubbles and Brews Philly. If you want to see what a vintage mobile prosecco and craft beer bar looks like, check them out. Yo, they have some of the flyest events. It's bananas. Check them out. Bubbles and Brews has really got it going on up there in that Philadelphia area. Um, they've been on the show. Go back and listen to the episode. Shots up all the time with my girl Janelle. Just amazing service that they're providing to everyone up there. Annette, thank you, for joining us tonight. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, feel free to follow us online at www.2micsup.com. You can follow us across our social media, IG, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already and hit the bell. Check it out before you go. We're coming back next week with a whole new live, and I think Lisa next week, I think we're going to talk about some of the things that we've lived through.
Lord, then
Lord,
that means we're gonna have Jasmine back on
right.
too. If I
Well,
don't
we're gonna
know
have
what
to,
I
yeah,
survived.
we're gonna have Jasmine just back on for therapeutic reasons.
We need her in
Right.
the background because I may pass the hell out.
Yeah, yeah. Because when I thought about it, I was like, I don't know if this is good or bad. I'm a little nervous because, like, I'm with you. I'm like, I might pass out. Thank you, Shatara.
Thank you, Shatar.
Shatara,
I mean,
appreciate it.
because I don't know, Dane. We'll discuss this off topic, and then we'll
Yeah,
have to have Jasmine on
right.
speed dial because I may need
Yeah, I
a
know.
session to talk about what
Right,
I've been
right.
through.
We gonna need a session just to get because when I thought of it, I was like, man, this is gonna be rough. This one right here is gonna be interesting. So yeah,
She
keep the
said,
meds
and
on
then don't
standby,
say
Lisa. Might,
right.
might have to go to that brown bottle of meds, Lisa. Might have to have that on standby. Right.
Self-medicating.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
So love you all. Thank you again for stopping by. Thank you for subscribing. We look forward to seeing you all next week. I hope you have a good weekend and a better week ahead. Stay safe, stay blessed. Mike's out.
Bye, everyone.